So let's get right into it. In the coming days, President Bola Tinubu is expected to present the 2025 appropriation bill for a joint session of the National Assembly. So in just a few hours, in fact, by this time tomorrow, we should be preparing to receive that budget before the joint session of the National Assembly. But not so fast, really. Let's talk about the 2024 budget. How well have we been able to meet the expectations, the targets, and the assumptions put in that budget? How well has that budget performed? I think it's important to really understand where we're coming from so we can chart a way forward. So lest we forget, how is the 2024 budget doing? And we have a panel on the show this morning just to walk through that. After all, it's your money. It is my money we're talking about here. We have joining us from our Abuja studio, a financial analyst, Mr. Johnson Olugbero. Welcome to the Morning Brief, as well as Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University, Professor Yushal Ango joins us virtually. We'll expand the panel as the show goes on. But let me start with you, Mr. Olugbero. Looking at the Budget Office of the Federation's website, you see the performance of the budget, at least for second quarter so far. And, well, it didn't look quite good for revenue, for example. We underperformed in terms of revenue generation. So we had a target of about 6 trillion quarterly, but we underperformed that. In terms of debt as well, we're racking up debt beyond the threshold, as it were, even for oil production, that's crude oil production. But largely, when you look at the budget performance for 2024, would you say it has underperformed? Has it done averagely well or overperformed for you?
Good morning, viewers. It's my pleasure to be here. Of course, if you look at the 2024 budget, I think in my view, and I believe in the view of many Nigerians, I think objectively, it's fair to say it has underperformed. And look at the metrics that you've quoted earlier. You want to look at the FX. The assumption was that it would be at about 750, to dollar. We know what it is today. It went as high as maybe 1.7 at some point. Now it's coming down. You want to look at in terms of the crude oil production per day. It was projected at about 1.8. We haven't met up. It was rumored maybe sometime last month that maybe we're doing around that number when Dangote refinery came on the scene, but the official numbers are not saying that. You want to look at pretty much all the assumptions really were completely off tangent, and this has been our experience in Nigeria. So I will say it is totally underperformed, just putting it mildly.
So when we look at 2024's performance and we say it has underperformed, I'll try to relate this to an athlete, for example, or footballer, right? So spend a lot of money, lots of hopes. And I don't want to mention any footballer so I don't get in trouble this morning. And for that season, the player that you expected to get at least 10 goals, a few assists, did not net as much. What are we expected to do? And I know this is still work in progress, right? So what are some of the things we need to fix? So they will suggest, for example, change the position of the player. So instead of the central midfielder, put the player on the wing. Maybe that's where the strength is. Or take that player off team and put the player on the bench so the player can go through some more training. So let's relate this to the budget now and sort of break it down. We've seen the underperformance, but what are some of the antidotes to this underperformance for you, particularly the ones you've identified?
Okay, so I think we probably need to do a combination of both, of everything you've said. Some have to change their wings, some have to get back to the bench, some have to send them off on loan, completely, and just, bring in new players that can perform. I think if we're not going to be too critical with the administration, people have said, well, that was their first budget. The 2024 budget was their first budget of this administration. They met a lot of crises on ground, and then, we have to understand where they are coming from and all of that. But let's even look at this 2024 budget. When the budget went to National Assembly and it came out, we're all shocked. We saw how the budget was padded up, and that wouldn't have been an issue. We were thinking, okay, let's see the items that made up for the difference. To our surprise, we were shocked to see very unthinkable items, on the list. In terms of how some traditional rulers, I mean, you know them more than I do, some projects that we didn't think were priority to, the economic recovery agenda of the government, of the Mr. President. So if you look at the genesis, so we have to go back to the process of even, how do we come up with these numbers? Budgets are done on assumptions of some economic data. So the first thing is, for me, the first antidote that I speak about everywhere on all media platforms is, if we don't get our data right, we've missed the whole point. As long as you are planning with the wrong data that are not reliable, it will interest you to know how we come up with what we even call unemployment. The last time I checked is if you are gainfully employed for at least an hour a week, you are deemed employed, and I mean you can't work with that. So the integrity of the data, how do we collect this data? Is the government sincere? The agencies of government who are responsible for helping us, gather this data, analyze them, and process them, how reliable are the data that we are using? And even with the poor data that we have, you also want to look at the sincerity of purpose on the side of the government. Let's even play the devil's advocate, right? Let's even take the numbers for what they are, and let's believe that government has done that with the best of intentions. You will see report from reliable sources how that many of the so-called infrastructure projects are more or less compensation packages, to party members, which is not supposed to be, and, more or less rub my back, I rub your back, kind of thing between the executive and those in the National Assembly. We have to move away from that. As long as we continue to do, and by the way, I know we're not yet talking about the 2025 budget. I was telling someone that don't even mention 47 trillion. Because it hasn't gone to the National Assembly. We all have to wait until tomorrow when the budget gets into the National Assembly and comes back. We might be talking maybe in excess of 50 trillion. At the end of the day.
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get to the 2025 budget, but it's a valid point you have made. And I'd like to take this to Professor Yushal Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University. Well, for the unemployment figure you mentioned, by the way, they say it's the ILO's new methodology for measuring unemployment and the rest, just to put it out there. But Professor Ango, they always say that the way economists or professionals look at figures, budget, is quite different from the way the average Nigerian or the average citizen sees things. So the average citizen sees it from a particular point of view, but economists usually see it from a broad view. So when you look at the performance, and again, as I said earlier on, the budget office put up the performance up until the second quarter, and you see some of these figures. See debt. Nigeria's total public debt is at $91 billion. As at the second quarter, there's been an update to that. You see all of the assumptions not being met. Is there another way to really tell the story aside underperformance? Do you see something different, Professor Ango?
Yes, well, there are a few things that are different. One of them, obviously, was that when the budget was submitted to the National Assembly, the assumption was dollar would exchange at 750, but when they brought it out, it was at 800. Today we know what it is. So from the perspective of revenue coming into government, we can see there is an increase, obviously, that in that aspect. But otherwise, most other projections have not been met. But more particularly, it was the budget, a watershed of some sort, because it was a budget actually made by this administration. And as you know, two budgets were run in 2023 and 2024, actually at the same time. But the budget made by this government was the very full budget made by this particular government. And I think it met with a lot of problems, especially with food inflation that happened in the course of the year. We have seen that stabilize somewhat, but in terms of the total picture of the budget, what we have is a budget that was designed right from the beginning to be more actually inclined towards recurrent, because what you look at as recurrent is both what is projected as recurrent and what was supposed to be paid as payment for due obligations. So if you put those together, they are far outweigh the projected capital budget right from the onset. So in that sense, we have done very well, quote and unquote, in making it more of a recurrent budget. And then in terms of deficit, yes, the budget was designed to have deficit, and the deficit had to be financed both by foreign and local debts of some sort. Based on what we have been seeing of recent, of the number of debts that have been approved by the National Assembly, we can say we have met, quote and unquote again, that particular requirement. But for the average Nigerian, it's been a very difficult year, especially, like I said, because of the inflation. And then normally the sector that suffers most when we have some of these challenges is the capital expenditure side of the budget. So you hardly see much, in terms of capital expenditure, and that is what will impact the average Nigerian more than anything. So we are in, if you like, some form of transition, and let's just pray that we'll stabilize better. Of course, we are seeing some positive signs in terms of the foreign reserves, improving. We hope to see better management of the foreign exchange market, and therefore reduction in inflation, and then more focus on the capital on the capital side of the budget. So if we have that, I believe that will assist substantially. And then we hope again to see that there will be, if you like, improvement, because we are seeing obviously some form of improvement in terms of the volume, of crude oil that is produced and exported or processed and daily. So those are positive signs. And of course, the growth of the economy in terms of GDP is also positive, relative, and is meeting up with the projected projections right from the beginning. So we are optimistic that hopefully, in the oncoming, especially the next year, things will stabilize, and then we see clear-cut development.
Right,
and Nigerians will be able.
Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Just land on your thoughts. I can throw in my question.
Yes, I'm through. Thank you.
Okay, so if you were seeing the screen, you would have seen that we put out the assumption of the 2024 budget, and then the performance so far. Some are plus and minus because they keep fluctuating, like crude oil price, things like exchange rates. So you can see that for inflation, we're performing abysmally. There's nothing to write home about, over 12% increase. You can see the crude oil, we're doing less of it, but that is not under our control in terms of pricing. But in production, we are seeing an improvement, although when it is crude itself, it's about 1.4. Condensate makes it 1.8. But the middle line, which is the exchange rate, is where we have one of the biggest problems. We can see the GDP growth rates. So my question will be, when you look at some of these numbers, we're also going to pan it around interest rate, inflation, and all of the issues that have to do with tapering inflation, how it hasn't been effective, although it has slowed it down at some point. When you look at how the government has managed the economy and these numbers that are speaking to facts, would you say that it suggests of some level of fiscal discipline? Because in terms of productivity, we haven't seen that much when we look at our export numbers at the end of the day.
Well, actually, we will not, because it's what you have that you use. In terms of fiscal discipline, we can say we're fair. We're doing relatively okay, especially, like I said, given what we can see in terms of spending. But unfortunately, like I said, more spending is in the recurrent, but that was what the design was. Now, the issue is, especially based on the earlier question, the expectation of the average Nigerian. The average Nigerian The most important that affect the average Nigerian is inflation, and those are affected by the exchange rate, by inflation, by the interest rates, and other factors, and of course fiscal expenditures and all that. In terms of fiscal expenditures, we have seen some reasonable management of these, but of course it is like you said. You cut your cloth according to the size. You're cut according to the size of your cloth. But basically, we need to do a lot more. We need to be more, more disciplined in the way we spend, and we expect that government will now put expenditure where it will impact the average Nigerian more. Like for example, the major cause of inflation in reality last year were two things, majorly transportation because of the increase in fuel prices and all that, and then food inflation, which is also affected by the cost of transportation and other costs. So some of these things, we are lucky. Like I said, we are now in the season of harvest and all that, but it's the long term that should be of concern to us. I have not seen much that has happened, that will actually take care of the long term. Of course, I've had the pronouncement from Mr. President saying that Nigeria will be a major exporter by 2025. I'm not sure where. Of course, he has a lot more information than me, but as a farmer myself, I don't know. I am not that optimistic, because of the expenditures. But of course, government has done so much, especially in distributing a lot of fertilizers and all that free of charge to farmers. The method of distribution is another thing altogether, but that is something. But I doubt if it is going to be sustainable.
Let's take it to our guest in Abuja. From where you sit and what you're seeing in terms of the performance of this particular 2024 budget. By the way, we also have 2023 budget, because this 2024 budget is both the main budget and the supplementary of 6 trillion that was added to make it about 34 trillion. And we have a record high that is coming for 2025. What can the government do to really use fiscal planning to impact people? Because what it seems, if you look at the inflation number and the exchange rate, which are the big ones, like what you call the blood pressure of an economy, the scorecard is really not as it should be, and the economic policy of the government is arguably responsible for this. What can the government do in terms of their fiscal planning to really impact the people? Because at the end of the day, that is what is the fundamental question. We can throw all of these macroeconomic numbers and feel good with ourselves, that FX is big, debt servicing is improved, but if the people don't feel it, it doesn't make no sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that agrees with my line of thought as well, because you need to go to the illiterate woman at the corner shop of your estate and ask her, between last year and now, how will you rate this government? You can just do that experiment. Just speak to random people, speak to Danfo drivers and conductors, and just have a feel of what they have to say, about the economy. Because sometimes, even numbers can be manipulated to achieve certain objectives. Like I was saying the other time, you can always manipulate data, and just achieve a gain that is not really there. But what I think we need to do, I spoke about improving our data earlier. One other thing I also think we need to do is that we need to have consistency in our entire fiscal framework, fiscal policy framework. Sometimes what we have seen in the past, which we also have seen, fairly even in this administration, is that sometimes policies of government are often not designed to harmonize themselves. So you see, you don't see that harmony there. So you see, you are making gain on this side, and then another policy just comes, and then the few gains that you have made from one policy is completely lost out, from other kind of policies. Which is why, for instance, we are hopeful that it's as if the government has finally woken up to realize that error, because probably with the new all form of reform that is ongoing now, the Nigerian tax bill and all of that. We hope that at the end of it all, they will be able to solve that problem. So you often see this inconsistency in policy. In fact, even between ministries, departments, and agencies, you see customs trying to do one thing, and then immigration trying to do another. Then aviation is doing something completely different. So at the end of the day, it's as if these guys are not talking to themselves. So if we harmonize our policies, we need to sit down together and look at the impact of one policy on, other areas of the economy. If we do that, we will definitely have better results, compared to what we used to have in the past. And thankfully, you mentioned 2023 budget. We also towards the end of the administration, the last administration, towards the end, we saw all kind of things. We saw particularly the last few months of the administration. We saw things that was even against our own rule. We were playing against our own rules. We introduced policies that was against for instance, if you look at the national tax policy that says that there has to be a minimum of 90 days if you are introducing a new law or you are amending an existing one. We just saw all kind of mismatch, and that didn't help us very much. And that's how we got to where we are. And one other thing I also think we need to do is that there has to be that discipline. You can't tell me that I should manage, as a leader of my house. If we are going out of protein, I leave the remaining ones for my children. That's what a leader will do. It's okay, guys, you can have it. But I can't be taking 4 meat, I'm taking 10 meat in my plate. Then I'm trying to explain to my children that, you guys have to manage, things are hard. I mean, they won't understand me. And that's where many Nigerians have found themselves. So we see the leadership telling us we should be patient. In my entire adult life, I've always heard how we need to be patient, with the government, things will improve, things will get better. And truly, if Nigerians are impatient at this point, you can't really blame them, because we've heard this in our entire adult life. Especially when you now look on the side of government and you see that what they are asking us to do, they are not necessarily living by their own tenet. So it becomes very difficult to want to identify with what they are doing. So these are some of the things that I think we can do in the immediate. We have to be more disciplined. We have to prioritize expenditure, reduce the cost of governance, merge ministry that has to be merged, scrap the ones that are not really contributing much to the economy, and then just reduce the expenditure to the barest minimum. Not just that you come out and tell us, we've seen instances where the government has come and told us, they are reducing this, but in the same week, you are hearing another news that is the exact opposite of what they have told us. So if we can have a combination of this and we are sincere, and we deploy these resources into the areas and the aspect of economy where they are meant for,
right.
And we are accountable and we are transparent, I believe we will see our numbers will get better, and I believe that the economy will get a better chance at recovery.
All right, Mr. Olubiru, let's take this to Professor Ango. And I want you to speak to some of the points you raised, at least one of it, which is the call for patience. One, do you think this government deserves that kind of extra patience from Nigerians, understanding that Nigerians have been asked to be patient for decades now, so it's something they're used to. So does this government deserve that patience? Does it look like the patience will pay off? That's on the one hand. On the other hand is, for you, I know there's a lot of academic rigor involved in what you do. Have you been able to pinpoint the agenda, or where this government stands on the spectrum? Is this a government that is more socialist in nature? Can you tell from its spending? Or it's more capitalist in nature? Is it for division of wealth or for retention of wealth? Prof, is that something you've been able to figure for this government? Professor Ango, that's for you, please.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get the question.
Two questions. I was asking, on the one hand, do you think this government deserves extra patience from Nigerians? Have you seen the government at least showing that it deserves that, on the one hand? On the second hand is, have you also been able to pinpoint what this government is about? Is it socialist or capitalist? Is it about division of wealth or retention of wealth? Have you been able to get a sense of this government's stance?
Well, let me start with the second one. I clearly is capitalist. I don't see any socialist inclination. What I see more is capitalist inclination. We have been doing so much under this government, to meet up more or less with clear prescriptions of what we know, typical of the Bretton Woods institutions. So that definitely that is not socialist at all. What we have seen is more of inclination towards capitalism. Now, as to whether we should be more patient, I mean, of course, Nigerians are very patient people. We have passed through a lot, and I believe after this year, because this is the year that the government is having its own full budget, that it crafted itself. I believe Nigerians can be patient enough and then watch until 2025 and see whether their lives will be better. Certainly, reforms comes a lot of, because government said it's been doing reforms, and reforms typically have to come with some pains. But I believe Nigerians are resilient enough. They can weather, if you like, some of this. But let's begin to see some progress, in terms of Human Development Index. I know that what we have seen, especially in terms of the policies that have come up since this government came into place, have had a lot of, they have challenged the average Nigerian in terms of cost of living and all that. But then Nigerians are willing, and usually able to withstand some of this. So we give them some time and see. But certainly the policies are capitalist oriented. Clearly, there's no doubt about it.
All right, Prof. I'm happy you mentioned that, because some people argue that according to Section 16 of the Constitution, Nigeria should be panning towards left of center, more like a socialist welfare state. But it's a hybrid of many things that sometimes is really not easy to define. But I was in a study on our GDP trajectory from when the government picked up. By the way, this is the second full year budget of this government. The first full year was 2024, and 2025 is going to be the second full year budget. So we can put that fact correctly for everybody who is listening. Help us understand, because they picked up the GDP at somewhere above 2.5 or 2 point something. Now it's about 3.4. But how does the growth of I'm trying to understand the contradiction, if that is the right word, between GDP growing and companies closing shop or scaling down their operations or literally divesting.
Now, the GDP growth is good. It's a positive development. It shows that the economy as a whole is moving up. We have seen better days. We have seen 2014, 2015, when we had GDP growth of about 8%, in Nigeria. And given what the president himself said, when he came into power, that he wanted to see an economy that has a GDP of $1 trillion economy, then we have a long way to go. So basically, to achieve that, we need to have clear-cut GDP growth, and GDP growth that will also have impact on the Human Development Index. GDP growth that will actually assist Nigerians and bring more Nigerians out of poverty. GDP growth that will enhance, if you like, the average GDP per capita of the average Nigerian. That is what we want to see. Because if inflation is rising much higher than GDP growth, then what we are seeing in effect will actually be negative growth. Now, put this side by side with the fact that a lot of multinationals are leaving the country. Now, that is a matter of concern, obviously, because what we want to do, or what we would hope for us to be able to achieve the economy we want to achieve, is to open our doors to foreign direct investment, genuine ones, I mean. But we don't know really whether those conglomerates, some of them that are leaving, perhaps maybe they have enjoyed a lot of subsidies, and so they cannot withstand, the regime of rates that we have now, or whatever it is. But whatever it is, whatever policy we should come up with, my suggestion is that we should do it, grow the GDP certainly, grow the GDP to economy to $1 trillion economy. As if you remember, before the coming of this regime, Nigerian economy was #1 in Africa. Today we are #3. We're moving towards #4. Why? Because of devaluation. Because if you look at the economy, you have to look at it in terms of, in dollar terms. That is how GDP is rated. So we moving to 1 trillion economy is becoming a Herculean task. So what perhaps that means is that we should now government should deliberately come up with policies that will, kickstart a lot of activity economically, internally, because we can do it. China did it internally before it opened its doors. We can do it. We have the population, we have the resilience, we have the dedicated and committed Nigerians, we have very industrious Nigerians. If we deliberately develop an economy that is growing from within, and moving, perhaps we can achieve that. We can also take advantage of a lot of opportunities around us. African Free Trade Acta that has come into effect. A lot of things we can do. Perhaps that is what we need to do. But sincerely, it's not good that some companies are leaving. We don't know why they are moving. If they are moving because they have enjoyed very convenient, very soft, maybe they are not able to withstand the difficult terrains we are going through.
My apologies. Some of the reasons they gave, of course, is the business environment, cost of production, all of that issue. But let's take you to Professor Mohammed on this one. Professor Mohammed, one of the things that was raised, or people are raising as concern, the government said, look, endure, we're in the right direction, and all of that. Okay, maybe we'll take it to Mr. Agbenro on this one. Endure, we're in the right direction. But people are saying, I don't understand what direction you're going, and life is getting worse for us because, of course, the numbers speak for themselves. The cost of living speaks for itself. Mr. Agbenro, in your view, is the government in the right direction? And if they are in the wrong direction, what will be that right direction?
It's a difficult question to answer. And I'm saying that because as much as we want to criticize the government, we also have to admit a fact. And the fact is, there are no easy way out of our problems. I don't care which candidate would have won the election. There is no easy way out. On paper, right? On paper, sometimes I think they are going in the right direction, frankly speaking. If you look at some of the reforms and you look at, you compare that with common practices and all of that. But it's a mystery. But in reality, we are not getting the kind of impact that the reforms should be giving us. So, for instance, our biggest FX, the biggest contributor to our FX used to be the crude oil. And you would think that as soon as Dangote came on board, the thing would have crashed. Thankfully, it has started coming down gradually, but if you do the math in terms of what we're importing, if that was taken out and we are now doing it locally, you would have expected, the FX to have further crashed down. So on paper, sometimes you want to think they are going in the right direction, but there are some other hidden practices here and there that sometimes is not helping us to get the right result. And let me give you an instance. We had a report from Budget, right, some times ago. They did a very intensive analysis on the budget performance over certain years. And what they found out was that many of the projects, many of the so-called infrastructure projects and the capital projects either did not exist or in instances where they existed were largely uncompleted, or where they are managed to be completed, the kind of thing you are seeing compared to how much money, that went into it, you can't even marry them together. So these are some of the things that is not helping us to get the right result. If you look at all the policies of government, I think throughout this administration, the MPR has consistently gone up. We are at about 27.5% now. And despite that, inflation has not dropped commensurately. with the increase in the MPR. So you want to look at these numbers. So you think on paper, it looks like everything looks good on paper sometimes, but then you will realize that the reason why we don't get a kind of result sometimes is because a whole lot of things are still not done properly. Government needs to be not only tell us that they are going in the right direction, they must be sincere, in their pursuit of that direction that they are going. And if people are asking that we don't even know where you are going, you can also excuse them. Yeah.
Indeed.
All right.
Let's anchor at this point, and I just want to take final comments from Professor Ango on what your expectations are. At least we have a peek into what the budget would look like, or the appropriation bill in this case. So, Professor Ango, what do you think is realistic? And I'm talking some of the assumptions that would see in the appropriation bill. What do you expect in terms of doing this realistically and based on the experiences we've had 2023 and 2024? Professor Ango, final words.
Projections, I've seen the assumptions. Some of them seem a bit realistic. The exchange rate, we probably can be able, sorry, I'm talking about the price per barrel of oil, maybe we'll be able to achieve that. In terms of production quantity that we expect, I also think we can accept that. But quite a number of things, like the previous speaker spoke, we need, beyond whatever policy we are coming up with, we need to be able to stand on two important things. And if we don't do that, I believe whatever is planned will just come and pass. Now, basically, we must ensure that we actually develop this economy from within. We must improve infrastructure and, as much as possible, patronize our own companies within Nigeria to do this. Now, we must somehow find a way within, of course, agreeing to market forces and all that, but within that, we have to find a way of managing the foreign exchange rate. If we allow it to oscillate anyhow, I don't see how we'll be able to manage, and meet the expectations of the budget, as well at the same time as the issue of interest rates.
Right.
We have played with it. The previous regime, we have been increasing this. And every MPR, we have been increasing basis points and all that. It has not given us what we desire. We know the problem. Every time there is the Federation account meeting and monies are distributed, the following day, the next day, exchange rate will start increasing. We know what that means. We know the implication of all that. So basically, if we are serious, we have to be firm. We have to ensure that we manage and reduce as much as possible this level of corruption and all that is taking place. We must ensure that Nigerians benefit from the fact that now, instead of 1/4 of our money going towards importation of processed fuel, right, we now have it internally. Okay.
Clearly, a lot of work to be done, and I'm glad you mentioned FAC. So that talks about local government, state government, and the federal government as well. So while we're having this conversation at the federal level, states are also, preparing their budgets. Local governments also get a lot of money. I mean, you imagine there's some local governments that get close to ₦1 billion monthly. And we expect that people should ask those questions. But we have to thank you so much, spotlighting these issues. Big days tomorrow, so we'll see how that plays out. But we've been speaking with Professor Yushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University, Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics of the same university. Thank you so much for your time, Prof., as well as Mr. Johnson Olumero, Financial Analyst, joining us from Abuja studio. Thank you as well for your time and very important thoughts. Well, we'll take a moment now, and when we return, we'll spotlight yet another issue which is of importance to you and I. That's the moment. Stay with us.